Hi, my name is Dr. Stella Jeffries. I would like to give a medical disclaimer. The information in this podcast are for educational purposes only and does not substitute professional medical advice or consultation with your healthcare providers. Why are Black people most susceptible to chronic diseases? In the 1200s in Africa, where the majority of Black people lived, there were many different cultures and society with diverse health practices and beliefs. Many African society have well-developed system of traditional medicine and healing practices which incorporated a holistic understanding of health that included physical, spiritual, and social well-being. So, what changed? Why are Black people most susceptible to chronic diseases? During this podcast, we will analyze the cause of the deterioration of the Black person DNA, the various factors affecting the DNA of the Black race, what's in the Black person DNA that predisposes them to chronic diseases, and how to prevent these diseases from transferring to the next generation of the Black race. All humans have the same DNA structure and function. The human genome is mostly the same in all people, but there are variations across the genome. Although there are small differences in the DNA sequence among individuals, the overall structure and function of DNA is the same in all humans. This shared genetic blueprint is what allows for developmental and function of all human life. Everyone has the same DNA codes: adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine. They are all the same for all race: Black, Caucasian, African American, Hispanic. All humans have the same DNA. Nearly every cell in a human body have the same DNA. Therefore, if all humans have the same body cells, have the same DNA molecules with the same genome, why are Black people more at risk for chronic diseases? Black people are most susceptible to certain diseases due to a combination of genetics, environmental, and social factors. Genetic factors can play a role in susceptibility to certain diseases. Environmental factors such as exposure to pollution and toxin can also contribute to disease susceptibility. How this all started. From the 1200s to the 1400s, what changed? Slavery had a significant and devastating impact on the health of Black people during the 1400s until the 1800s. Black people's DNA changed under harsh condition of slavery through a process called mutation. Mutation can occur naturally or as a result of exposure to various environmental factors such as extreme stress, radiation, chemical, and extreme temperature. Mutation can be harmful and lead to genetic disorder or diseases. The extreme stress on the Black race activated their genes in a way that led to changes in their DNA expression without actually changing the DNA sequence itself. This has had a range of effects on Black health and development. DNA is a complex and dynamic molecule that responds to a wide range of environmental factors in various ways, including changes in its sequence and expression. Before the 1400s, Black people had well-developed systems of traditional medicine and healing practices which incorporated a holistic understanding of health that included physical, social, and spiritual well-being. After the 1400s, Black people were subject to harsh living and working conditions that were devastating to their health and caused their DNA to mutate adversely. Black people around the world during slavery were forced to work long hours in dangerous and physical demanding conditions, which led to injuries, chronic pain, and other health problems. These demanding conditions cause spontaneous mutation and induce mutation to the gene of the Black race. As the result, Black people were predisposed to hypertension, diabetes, anxiety, and other chronic conditions. And to this day, Black people are still predisposed to hypertension, diabetes, anxiety, and other chronic conditions due to the DNA mutation, which continue to be passed down from generation to generations. Gene mutation of the Black race consists of substitution mutation, which have caused the gene to substitute for the wrong chromosomes. Also, insertion mutation, which cause the gene to insert into another chromosome or also to insert into the wrong chromosomes. Deletion mutation, where Black people had large chromosomes deleted or missing from their DNA molecules. Duplication mutation, where duplication of the bad DNA continue to replicate. Inversion mutation, where the DNA flips upside down and cause it to have the wrong DNA coding. And or translocation mutation, where the DNA transfer or translocate. All of these occurs due to the harsh conditions of the legacy of slavery. It is important to note that DNA mutation can affect people of any race or ethnicity, and the effect of the mutation can vary depending on the specific mutation and the individual's genetic background. That being said, certain DNA mutation may impact individuals of Black and African descent. For example, point mutation. Point mutation can occur in any population, and the effects can vary depending on the location and the type of mutation. For example, sickle cell anemia, a genetic disorder that affects the production of hemoglobin, is caused by a point mutation in the HBB gene that is more common in people of African descent. Another mutation is substitution mutation. Similarly to point mutation, the effect of substitution mutations can vary depending on the specific mutation in the gene involved. For example, a substitution mutation in the MYBPC3 gene has been found to be more common in people of African descent and is associated with an increased risk of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Insertion and deletion mutation. These mutations can lead to frameworks which can disrupt the reading frame of the gene and alter the resulting protein. There is evidence to suggest that some insertion and deletion mutation may be common in certain populations, but the effect of these mutations can vary wildly depending on the gene and specific mutation. Duplication mutation. This mutation is complex and multifactorial, and the effects of mutations can be influenced by a variety of factors, including other genetic variants and environmental exposure. In addition to the harsh physical condition, slavery also had a profound impact on the mental health of Black people. Slaves were often separated from their families and cultural tradition, which caused immense emotional trauma. The constant fear of punishment and violence also has significant psychological impact on the Black race. Slaves were also vulnerable to a range of diseases, many of which were new to them and for which they had no immunities. This also caused the DNA mutation. Slave quarters were often overcrowded and unsanitary, which allowed diseases like smallpox, typhoid, cholera to spread quickly. Slaves were often forced to work long hours in physical demanding jobs and were housed in camp and unsanitary living quarters, which made them vulnerable to illnesses like tuberculosis. According to the research, the legacy of slavery has had profound impact on the health outcomes and well-being of Black people, both in the United States and other parts of the world. Slavery and its aftermath has been associated with a wide range of negative health outcomes for Black people, including higher rates of chronic diseases, mental health issues, and mortality. The harsh condition and environmental factor influence gene expression. They do not typically cause change to the underlying DNA sequence. It is important to note that the effect of slavery and racial discrimination have been shown to have intergenerational effects on health outcomes. Studies have found that descendants of enslaved individuals may be at risk for certain health conditions such as hypertension and diabetes due to cumulative impact of environmental stressor and structural inequalities over time.
That racism is a serious public health threat in America. It acknowledged something that researchers have found for decades. On nearly every measure of health, African Americans are more prone to serious disease and premature death. The coronavirus pandemic has provided devastating evidence of this. Black Americans have died of COVID-19 at twice the rate of whites, and so far are being vaccinated at a dramatically lower rate. Poverty and unequal access to high-quality health care play a role in these disparities, but
there is hope. The hope is that the underlying DNA sequence of Black did not change. Therefore, we need to address the health disparities in the Black community to revert to the normal structure and function of the Black person DNA. The health disparity in the communities are often driven by systemic racism and discrimination, which have limited access to resources such as health care and educational, as well as contribution to chronic stress and other negative health outcomes. It is important to acknowledge and address these disparities in order to improve the health and well-being of Black people and promote health equity more broadly.
That racism has on the health of people of color all around the world. You have conducted rigorous psychological, sociological, scientific studies of this phenomenon.
That's correct. We've done studies in South Africa, their colleagues doing studies in Australia, studies in the UK, studies across the world, and we find in all of these contexts, empirically, statistically, that experiences of discrimination are directly impacting health.
Can something as complex and subjective as racial discrimination really be measured? Williams insists it can, with a test that he created nearly 25 years ago. What is the Everyday Discrimination Scale?
The everyday discrimination scale is a measure, a 9-item measure. It has items like you're treated with less courtesy than others, you're treated with less respect than others, you receive poorer service than others in restaurants or stores, people act as if they're afraid of you. It's little ways in which your dignity is chipped away on a daily basis. And what we are finding is that persons who score high on the everyday discrimination scale have a broad range of adverse health conditions. It predicts high blood pressure. It predicts the onset of diabetes. It predicts incident cardiovascular disease. It predicts poorer mental health.
Professor Williams has demonstrated that the health of Black Americans suffers whether they are rich or poor, well-educated or not. Black women with college degrees are more likely to see their babies die as infants than white women who didn't finish high school. Another stark example, the 1970 graduating class at Yale. The Black graduates were 3 times more likely to die prematurely than their white classmates.
That's correct. I mean, that's the magnitude of some of the racial disparities in health we see.
Just to make this abundantly clear, a Black man or woman with a college degree, making a lot of money, is less well off, health-wise, than a white man or woman in the same category under the same circumstances?
Absolutely.
David Williams' research shows that even when treated in the same healthcare settings, Black Americans are less well cared for than whites.
One researcher coined the term weathering to describe what is happening to African Americans. Imagine a drop of water falling from the rooftop of this building to the concrete sidewalk below. If the water drips today, it's no big deal. But if day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out, there is a constant drip, drip, drip of water, the sidewalk, the concrete below, would become weathered. It becomes eroded by the constant exposure to adversity. And so what the research is suggesting that all of these stressors are weathering African American.
Structural racism perpetuates social and economic inequalities that have a negative impact on the health and well-being of Black people. Addressing this inequality requires systemic change, such as investing in health, education, housing, healthcare, as well as implementing policies that promote equity and justice. Increasing access to healthcare, Black people continue to experience disparity in healthcare access and inequality, which can have a negative impact on health outcomes. Please like and subscribe to the podcast